Morning, Tom. It's 7 a.m., January 11th, and we'll call this meeting of the Fergus Falls City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Roll call, please.
Here.
Thompson. Rachel.
Here.
Hicks. Fish.
Here.
Joe.
Here.
Foreman.
Here. Here.
We have a quorum. First item of business this morning is a discussion item on a consultation for tax increment financing report, and we'll call on our Community Development Manager, Clara Beck. Good morning, Clara.
Good morning, council members. This is a request that was before you during your first meeting of the year, I believe is when we first discussed it. It is now back in front of you for further discussion with a little bit more details so that you can make a more informed decision before potentially moving forward with it. So the Shopco site is under contract for purchase by FM Bank here in town, and they are going to be requesting tax increment financing from the city. Part of that process that we do every time that we embark on a TIF study is to engage the services of Baker Tilly. They are municipal advisors who help us through the but-for analysis, and then later on down the road, should TIF be approved, they are also the ones who help draft up the TIF agreement. So what we'll be discussing this morning is just moving this forward to Baker Tilly for that but-for analysis. I sent out to council members who are new and then returning council members a little bit of information on what TIF is and how it works as a mechanism for financing projects. In this case, what we're looking for Baker Tilly to do is just the but-for analysis part of it, which we would then add into the packet of information that would come before you for discussion as part of the full TIF application. So what Baker Tilly would do then is they would review the financials, review the outcomes of the project, and they would say that but for the use of TIF, this project would not move forward. And in that case, then City Council can continue a discussion about TIF financing. So this morning, all we're doing is we're just talking about engaging the services of Baker Tilly to do that but-for analysis. In your packets, there's a little bit more information about the project. I included the narrative application that came from the TIF application from FM Bank that explains a little bit more about the project. It's estimated to be about a $9 million project when all is said and done. They would be tearing down the existing building and leaving space for other development on the site, and also developing a building that would be able to share space with other businesses in town. So it does have the potential to spur extra development beyond just the development of a new bank building. So I do have Mr. DeBrito here in the audience this morning. He can answer any further questions, but that is the high level of this project, and the request that's before you is, again, to retain the services of Baker Tilly. Any questions?
Thanks, Clara. Questions first for Clara from Council. Anthony?
I think the only question I had was, like, what is the proposal for the old site? Do they have any?
What's the proposal for the old site? So the building removal?
The existing. I think he means the existing site.
My
Existing.
understanding is that the building would be purchased by another entity, so it would be for sale.
Right. Thank you.
Yes. And then I should note, what they are requesting currently is just 3.5 years of TIF financing. So they're only looking for financing for the actual removal of the building. They'd be using redevelopment TIF, so that would be just taking down that old building. They've got an estimate that puts it at about $350,000 to remove that building. The option has been put out there to also apply for a deed redevelopment grant to help fund that. In talking with Deed, it doesn't seem like that program would be quite the right fit for this project, so there is the potential for this to come back as a 7-year TIF rather than 3.5. We're still in discussion, we're still doing some research, but that is a potential down the road. So what I'm going to suggest is that if we do move forward with Baker Tilly, that they run both scenarios. They do it as a 3.5-year and a 7-year, so that we can make an informed decision when we know more about that deed program.
And just to reiterate, the financial commitment from the city at this point is nothing. It's just engaging the cost for Baker Tilly to run the analysis, to bring back to the council for a full consideration is part of the project that FM Bank would be
That's correct.
responsible for. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep, they have put down money in escrow that we would then use to pay Baker Tilly, so the city is not paying for this process.
But it does require the city to be the one who engages the
Correct.
tax increment analysis. So,
They would be acting on behalf of the city, Baker Tilly would, yes.
yes.
I would make that recommendation, Your Honor.
So we have a recommendation to bring this to the council to engage the services of Baker Tilly for the analysis.
Correct.
Thank you,
I'll second
Anthony. Second by Jim. Discussion? Again, we'll have time to discuss this Monday night if there are further questions, but at this point, we'll move this to the council with a motion. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you, Clara.
Thank you.
Item number 2, we will also call on Clara for a housing tax rebate program overview.
I don't know why I thought I should sit down. Yes. This was requested that we do just an overview of this program and maybe discuss any next steps the city would want to take. So I have this little presentation for you. I did print it out. The words are super tiny, so I apologize for that, but I thought they would be bigger. They are not. So, So this program is one that we share in with the county. So it was started through the Big Build program. It's called the Single and Two Family Property Tax Rebate Program. We entered into it initially in January of 2020, and it is slated currently to run through December 31st, 2024. So the purpose of this program is essentially to spur new development of housing, either the removal of dilapidated housing or greenfield space building something brand new. It was initially only slated to run through, I believe, 2022 and was expanded back in November of 2021 by this council to match an expansion by the county to go through 2024. So the overview of the program is that applicants apply before they begin building, and they are then, if they are accepted into the program, eligible for $5,000 of rebate on their property taxes over 5 years, or whichever comes first, either rebates over 5 years or that $5,000, whichever they are hitting initially. It's primary residences only, specifically in Fergus Falls. That's a choice that council made, so it is not available for rental properties. The applicant initially can be the builder of the home, or it can be the homeowner themselves. Just depends on the situation. If it is the builder, they can transfer that rebate then to whoever purchases the home once it is built. And then just as a general rule, what we like to see is that the program approvals are received before building starts. Here's just a little bit more information about the rebate info. So it's the full amount of the property taxes that are raised, so we lock them in at what the rate is initially. So if it's just a bare site, any of the increment that's above that, based on any building, that's what gets captured. That's what then can be rebated at the end of the year. So it's that value increase in the property. So partial construction of homes, if they've started a home, haven't finished it yet, they can see kind of just a very incremental rebate then year over year, because again, it runs over that 5 years. So the county goes out, they assess the property every single year, and then they're the ones who are determining what that increment is and what's coming back. And then just as a reminder of the county's program, so they are rebating up to $10,000 now. They did an expansion again, I believe, last year. So initially it was $5,000 county, $5,000 for any city that was involved in the program. It is now up to $10,000 from the county, and then the city of Fergus Falls stayed at that $5,000. So rebates could be available for up to $15,000 for properties if they're applying both at the city level and at the county level. And in general, when people are applying, they are applying for both city and county. If construction has not commenced within 1 year of the applicant being entered into the program, we do ask that they reapply again. So again, an overview of what our program is doing. This is not county, this is the city of Fergus Falls. We have 47 units in the program, and units are either a single family home that's been built, or in the case of a duplex situation, each of those units is counting as each unit is considered separately. So if you're building a duplex, you're not getting just $5,000 for both units, it's $5,000 per unit, if that makes sense. The average projected value of one of the properties that's in the program is $353,023. So it's a fairly high value of the homes that we're seeing being entered into the program. And then as the kind of units, we've got 21 single-family homes, 26 twin homes, and then we have not seen any rehabs or significant additions to homes, which can also be considered for the program. We just haven't seen any of those applications come in. So our program, by my math, is we have, if all of the rebates are paid out in full over those 5 years, we have $235,000 that we would be rebating to properties. And then based on the estimates that are given in the applications by the applicants, we are seeing over $16 million in housing value that's being built then, either based on this program or being utilized by this program. So I just laid out a couple of next steps for ease of decision making. We can either just keep the program as it is for the next, year, 2 years, and then see it sunset at the end of 2024. You always also have the option of discontinuing the program if you don't think that it is meeting the goals that you would like it to meet. And then another option would be to, since the city has opted in of our own accord, we do have some rules that are specific only to Fergus Falls. For instance, the fact that it can't be a rental, that's Fergus Falls specific. So you could put further parameters in place to ensure that the program is meeting goals that you'd like it to meet. Based on conversation we've had in the past, I think a couple of those goals could be pushing for some more significant rehab. So people that are buying older homes and expanding or doing significant work on them that will see an increase in taxes, they could be entering the program. We could do a push for that. You could also potentially cap the estimated value of a house. So you're seeing houses that are more fitting that entry level of housing rather than maybe some of these higher dollar amounts. So those are just a few things that we've talked about in the past, and I figured I would place out there for you as potential options. So yeah, Tom.
I had an idea that just magically popped into my head. If it doesn't create too much extra work, how about some kind of a tiered structure where the city determines what our priorities are as far as, rehabs and entry-level housing, and would it work where the applicant could get possibly more credits based on how many of those boxes they check?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Scott and then Jim.
Maybe building on what Tom was just suggesting, you mentioned that the county is at $10,000. If we wanted to really incentivize rehabs, for example, you could maybe match the county's approach with a $10,000 deal, and yet on the other end, cap the project value for $5,000 at, say, 300 or some more entry-level number. Just throwing those out as possibilities, but I think both of those things would fit with the kind of tier idea that Tom is suggesting.
Thanks, Scott. Jim?
Do we need to put a cap on the value of the home being built? I mean, we had one not too long ago that was over $1 million. I think if they're building $1 million home, I'm not sure they need the extra money for the tax part of it.
Yep. Yeah, that is the discussion that we're having, is how would you like to move forward? Mm-hmm.
Al?
I guess I'd like to kind of touch on what Jim had said too. With how many people that are going to build a $250,000 home really need the $5,000 from the city, where maybe that could go into something else. With personal experience, took advantage of this old house program years ago, and I don't know if that's still going or not, but took an old house, a very old house, and basically redid it. What that does, it brings a lot of pride of ownership into somebody that has an old house or a younger couple that wants to redo their home. It incentivizes them to do that if the money could be directed for something like that.
That's an
Thanks, Al.
interesting idea.
Question on that, like the rehab we're not seeing any of this money being used for rehab, and do people even know that it's available?
It's part of the program literature, but there are no parameters that are out there that explain what a significant rehab really is. And it can be difficult to kind of guess what's going to translate into a significant enough tax increase that it would really be worthwhile. So like adding a new roof to your house you think would add a lot of value, and it really doesn't.
You know, to Al's point, like, I don't know if that program exists anymore.
Not that
but,
I'm aware
but,
of.
you know, this is just money that the city, this is tax money that the city could put towards any, you know, I mean, it could be the amount of investment that it doesn't have to be based on increase in taxes. That's just something that we put out there as a justification for what we're not, how we're rebating money. But if people are investing in their homes to, increase the value of the neighborhood, like Al's saying, I mean, I think we could certainly look at that as a, because there's a lot of homes in town that can use a lot of work. Yes, please.
One more item. I guess what it will do is, as you walk a neighborhood and you walk a ward, you can see what's really needed when you're actually on somebody's front step. And there's some people that probably can't afford a new step or can't afford a new door. This might be something that could really help them out. And what it's going to do, it's going to bring back our inner city type, so to speak, back to a nice looking neighborhoods instead of anything in disrepair.
Yeah, one thing to add, because if you see when you walk those wards, you see especially rentals, right? Like you see rentals that are like it grows out. You see one rental property that's in disrepair, and it's like the ones around it are like, I'm not investing in my property. So I don't know if there's a way to look at just the investments that people are making in properties to benefit the neighborhood. But Jim.
Possibly an article in the newspaper, we do have the newspaper here, and explaining the whole program. I know I see other things that you've had in there, and it explains on what's going on, but maybe.
He's not telling you what to do, but. Thanks, Jim. Yeah.
Again, going back to the question of rehab and how to get people interested in it, it might be interesting to know what kind of success the county has had on that side of things. Have they had much in the way of applications for rehab either? This isn't necessarily unique to Fergus Falls. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. In discussions with Amy Baldwin, I think they've seen 2 that have successfully entered in with rehabs, and in that case, they're adding significant additions to a home. So it's really increasing the square footage.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to this whole discussion we had on how properties are evaluated through the county assessor and when they're valued, and like if you get a building permit to put a roof on, when does that go in and how much does it go in? And the county assessor visits the property once every 4 years, and so all that stuff goes in. It makes it kind of complicated. Yeah.
So just quickly piggybacking on what Jim said about, and Al commented on too, is if you're building $1 million house, do you need a $5,000 tax credit? Anecdotally, for whatever it's worth, I've talked to people that have said, that they built in Fergus because of the tax credit. They're like, well, yeah, we can build, be closer to town and get an extra $5,000, so why not? And again, for whatever that's worth. But I mean, I do see the logic behind, well, if you're spending that much on a house, do you really need a $5,000 credit? But how much of a difference is it making on those property taxes coming to us versus staying outside the city?
Thank you.
Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, I would also agree with many of the comments. Obviously, I'm in the same camp that I think there should be a cap of, a limit. But I also have to think, you have to look at the program. I mean, there was 36 in 2020, 5 in 21, and 6 in 22. So the program, obviously, maybe it had that kind of initial burst, but it's kind of faded. And we can blame COVID and we can blame everything else, but the bottom line is, there's only 6 houses built last year in Fergus Falls, which is
6 in the program.
In the program,
There's more
yeah.
than that overall.
So it's not really being a big stimulus to get more people here. But I also think that we have to look at something like for first-time buyers. I think one of the issues that a first-time buyer has is basically being able to afford a house, and I think somehow if we could even look at like a pre-approval program, so they could go to the bank and say, I have a $5,000 tax credit, and then the other thing is like, I think my property tax went up by 30%, and I didn't do anything to my house. So do I qualify?
Maybe. You gotta fill out the application though.
Yeah.
I think a
Yeah,
lot
we
of
have not
people
seen your
would be in that,
application, sir.
in that capacity.
And I think that's the problem with the rehab is like how are you gonna? It's hard to define it.
Yeah.
And then I think as well, if we do put a cap on it, we have to have some sort of means check, because people come into the city, they say I'm going to build a $350,000 home on my building permit. They obviously sign off on that. And then I think, especially if it's a builder, if they enter the program saying they're going to spend 350, or that's the value of the house, then if they're going to sell it for 400, it's not a $350,000 home. So maybe then they get kicked off the program. So, I think it's probably not something we're going to resolve.
Yeah, we
this
can
morning
have
because
some good
quite a lot-
discussion that we
yeah.
could maybe have it come back. But just to make a point, like, on the complexity of the rehab, we have total control over how to, design this program. If people make a certain amount of investment in a home that's X amount of years old or whatever, that's exterior, that improves the neighborhood, then we can rebate them as much as you know what I mean? Like, we have the control over that, and I think that's what I hear out from the rehab side of things. Don't make it overly complex.
Maybe we have to look at rentals. I mean, I know it's, there are a significant number of rentals in Fergus. And so if you want to improve a neighborhood like Al is suggesting, then,
Yeah, absolutely.
what's the difference if they're improving the stock of housing, whether it's a rental or a home?
Maybe we can call Lee, but are you getting some good information you can bring back for maybe a discussion of what a proposed or a modified
Yeah.
program might look like? Lee,
Could I speak to the council?
please do, Lee.
Oh, boy.
Can we put it up to a vote?
Yeah, can you put that as well? Good morning, Mayor and Council. This is exciting conversation for myself. I think what we want to do is engage all the comments that we've heard this morning. And I being very interested in this program from the outset, we want to take a look at what the origin and the generator of the program was really designed to do, and that was to increase housing so that we can bring people to our community who can then take the jobs that are being created in the community. So, in other words, what we're trying to create with this program is front doors with a light on the side and a number on the exterior of that. And the incentive is to build. It's not welfare. We should never look at this as being a welfare issue and conceding how if they can do this or do that. What we'd rather see is they are incentivized to build in this community and, of course, in Fergus Falls. When you can spend approximately $235,000 and increase your base by $16 million, you are increasing the base so that your taxes do not rise. In other words, a higher tide raises all boats. So consequently, we're trying to bring this in to replace the properties that are going off the tax roll. And we've had a significant one in this community with the Otter Hill Powers plant. So we need to replace all of those dollars of property in our community so that our personal taxes don't get the hit. Now, I had a farmer friend who I highly respect that taught me a good lesson on this, and that is you cannot lose something that you never had. You cannot lose something that you never had. So if you don't give away 235, you don't get the 16 million. And the 16 million will go way beyond our lifetime and into the subsequent generations. So that is just some points I made. I didn't come prepared to make any presentation, but these are just some off the cuff remarks. But what has happened is, as this program has been going forward, it has been morphed into other ideas, and that's what I hear this morning. What about rentals? What about rehabs? Rehabs are very eligible, but they're not for putting on roofs, siding, windows. They're for putting on a bedroom or a family room or a garage combo of any of those types. They would be qualified, most likely. So they would enhance that. But going back, it's front doors that we were looking for. These programs that you are coming up with and asking about this morning they're what we need to be creating. Trying to use this program to do that delivery might be a complication, but there are other programs available. So let's not let this be the end of all of our conversations when we're looking for rentals, when we're looking for rehabs and things of that nature. I would suggest you got some new people on the council, and refreshers for all of us is good. If you would like to have a presentation from the county on the county's perspective, from the CDA, the Community Development Agency, we'd be glad to come. Maybe a 15-minute, 20-minute workshop or something of that nature. But this is good conversation this morning, and I really encourage that we keep this program going. Yes, it's dwindling, as we heard this morning, but national housing has gone down. There's a lot of things that are impacting. So we're flowing with the ebb and flow of our county, state, and federal as well.
Thank you, Lee.
I'll sit down.
Thank you, Lee. And I think we have some good discussion this morning. Obviously, we're not going to resolve it this morning, but you have what you need. The only thing I would add to Lee's comments is if there are things that come out of this discussion that aren't covered under the current program, we'll certainly go back to the county and ask them to match whatever the city does for our rehab. So just be prepared for that as well, Lee. So thanks for being here this morning. Item number 3 is a discussion on the golf course rates at Pebble Lake, and we'll call on Kevin Swenson to make that presentation. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Council, Mayor. I know it's January, but we're going to talk a little bit about golf. We need to get our rates approved for the 2023 season, and I think you've got some information in front of you. We're looking at a 10% ask on our daily rates and memberships to help cover the 30 to 40% increases in our equipment repair, fuel, everything else that's going up. So a couple things I want to go over too. This is the only time of the year I get to talk to you about what happened the previous year in our last golf season, and some numbers I put together. We opened this last season May 2nd, which was 32 days later than the previous year in 21 was April 1st. I make my business plan based on April 15th to October 15th. So the last 2 seasons we stayed open through the end of October, which is very rare for a rural Midwestern golf course. We were open for 168 days straight this last season once we opened May 2nd. And we closed in October for a couple freezing days compared to 21 when we were open for 211 days out of 213. We only had 2 rain days in 21. So the last 2 seasons we were open a lot and made golf available for a lot of people. On 20 last season, we had just under 24,000 rounds of golf played at Pebble Lake, and we were about 1,376 rounds short of the 25,000 rounds played in 21. Of those rounds, last year we had about 6,200 guest rounds, which were people that come and pay to play our golf course, versus the 7,100 or 7,700 rounds played in 21 by guests from out of town and non-members. We had 228 paid households in 21 and 287 last season. The industry standard for a golf course our size, population community of our size, is right around 300, so we're kind of hanging right in there with the industry standard. It is continuing to rise a little bit, so our biggest increase was in families and youth, so very proud of the fact that we're a very youth-based golf facility. And speaking of that, I had 113 players last year again. So out of my 8 seasons at Pebble Lake, I've had 1 season under 100 kids. Otherwise, it's always been over 100, which is pretty good for our size of facility.
That's our future.
For sure, for sure. So I'm very proud of that, and it's one of the things I have the most fun with of those kids, including they use our driving range and practice facilities, which last year there was 11,000 of the little the range buckets, the driving range, people that come and just use the practice facility. There's 11,000 buckets hit, and there was only 7,500 buckets hit in 21, so it is increasing a lot. We hosted 53 golf events last season, 3 weddings and 2 cross-country meets, so other than golf, there's other activities out there. And now with the addition of Palmer's Kitchen and Bar out there, we definitely increased the experience potential at Pebble Lake, and it showed last season with our shortened golf season. The numbers were strong. So anyway, there's a few things. We also were, something I was after from this get-go is we were named the best of Otter Tail County for a golf venue, which was voted on by over 47,000 people. And we beat out Durham, Stalker, and Thunder Pond for the first time. So, and I think a big part of that vote is dining. So with Palmer's Edition, it was big. It's a good, that was a nice award to get. So anyway, we got some updates to our golf carts this season, the motorcycles, and the AC system. So it'll be a very comfortable and busy place as usual.
Thanks, Kevin. Jim?
I'd just like to mention that just looking at this whole thing on the maintenance end of it, the fertilizer, the fuel, and everything that Lance needs to run the course is going to be about $60,000 higher this year than last year. We already know that. And it could be higher yet if fuel and fertilizer goes up even more. So there is a need for the increase.
Thanks, Jim. So, Tom?
And I'll just thank Kevin for all the good things you've done since you've taken over. We've really seen kind of a renaissance out there. And as a father of 2 kids that suffered under you during the summer golf program, thank you very much. And you're doing good work. Keep it up. It's one more feather in our cap to get people to come here and want to spend money and hang out. And so we appreciate it.
Appreciate that.
Thanks, Tom. Someone want to make a motion that we bring these rates to the council on Monday night?
I will do that.
Thank
Your
you,
Honor.
Jim.
Second.
Thank you, Tom. Any further discussion or questions for Kevin? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Hang on one second.
Would you mind at the end of every motion asking where you'd like it on the
Sure,
agenda?
sure. Anyone have an objection to this going on the consent agenda on Monday night?
No.
Okay, we'll put this one on the consent agenda. Thank you, Lynn, for that. So that motion carries. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Have a nice day. Item number 4 is a state federal delegating contracting process, also commonly referred to as a DCP, agreement number 1052055. Brian Uvaro.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, members. Yes, pursuant to federal law and Minnesota statute, the city of Fergus Falls is required to pass a resolution designating the Commissioner of Transportation, MnDOT, as the agent to the city to accept federal funds, which these funds can be used for local eligible projects. These agreements cover the standard roles and responsibilities with these funds and allow MnDOT to act as the local agency's agent in accepting these funds for these projects. I have attached the agreement before you from requesting a resolution to accept this agreement. I believe this was last done 5 years ago. So this has been going on, accepting these agreements as a channel acting by the state for some odd time. So at present moment, I'm just requesting authorization to execute this agreement. And I'll hold up to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Brian.
I'll offer that.
Thanks, Scott.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm assuming this can go on the consent agenda unless anyone has any objections. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Brian's also up for Public Improvement 5314, which is the Union Avenue Fur to Lincoln project.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Yes, and just before the memo before you, this is a federal aid project that's been in the process for some time. About a month ago, I requested reauthorization to advertise for this project. If you recall, we did this last year. It came in about $1 million over the budget. Based on discussions with the contractors, it was evident the existing street pavers was one of the issues they were perceived at the time as time-consuming, high-risk, and expensive. Therefore, past winter, we revised the bid documents to include an alternate bid consisting of removing these deteriorated street pavers and with concrete border and installing a full-depth bituminous street section. This was proposed at each intersection along Lincoln Avenue. I just prepared an exhibit, and we'll go through that just a little bit more. But which I noted back in December that the state central office did not fully consent to this alternate bid option. They recently responded, and the FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration, considers alternate bidding as a form of shopping instead of seeking the lowest bid. I tend to disagree. That's why we're looking. However, if we proceed with doing this alternate bid, we're going to have to get permission through central office, and first, then going to the federal government to get this permission. Based on my conversations with individuals at the state, this is very time consuming and not too many of them can recall when this has happened in recent history. Therefore, consideration of this, in my opinion, I presented two options for you. I figured just prepare this exhibit, if you could turn to the screen, might provide a little bit more detail of what I'm requesting. So before you right here, this is an exhibit of an intersection. This is particularly Court Street and Lincoln Avenue. The base bid, which we already had bid, consisted of resurfacing projects. So the parts in yellow, which is Lincoln going left-right, that's to be resurfaced and including the inner circle at the intersection. If you look, you can see the little hatching surrounding the circumference of the circle. That's those existing street pavers. Like I said, that was already bid before, and it was very expensive, I guess, per the contractors to protect it. So if we are proposing alternate option 2, right here, very similar, we're still resurfacing project on Lincoln. However, is what I'm requesting, the area in blue is removing all the bituminous, all the concrete pavers, all the concrete ribbon, and just installing a full depth bituminous street section in that, and then it'll be overlaid as we overlay Lincoln as well. I would like to note we're going to have to be doing, per the traffic control, we're going to be doing half of the intersection either north or south first, so we're maintaining traffic. So it's still complex, but yet we feel it can be done. These pavers, the reason I'm presenting this to this council, this is a unique feature to downtown. However, it's decades old. It is very problematic for snow plowing and maintenance and everything, but I wanted to give City Council an option to weigh in on this. We feel with option 2, based on bid estimates that have increased, but we still feel this is a cheaper option, doing the full depth repair as presented at option 2. But like I said, I'd like the council to weigh in on this project. If acceptable, with proceeding with option 2, we'll revise the bid documents just to include this in the base bid. It'll be sent to central office for final approval. Then we can start hopefully re-advertising for bids here in the next month or so. However, that's contingent upon state review. So at this time, I'm requesting discussion and motion to pursue option number 2 in the final bidding documents.
Thanks, Brian. Question, so how does that affect the, I assume it doesn't, but do we have a plan for the pavers on the sidewalk that are in need of repair at the same time?
I don't have sufficient fundings. You can also see in there, we're doing at each intersection quadrant, we're replacing the ped ramps and improving them to current standards. Those pavers are going to be removed and salvaged, and we're going to be installing new concrete, regular color, I guess you could say, concrete in those particular intersections. The street pavers and everything, we're going to just be removing, not going to try to salvage them. I think that'd be very time intensive at this time.
Sure. No,
But along between intersections on budding, I don't have simply enough funds to address those at this time.
Sure, so it's, the street is taken care of, but the sidewalk, at this point, there's not a plan to do anything with the sidewalk.
Just the quadrants of
Got
each
it.
intersection.
Okay, thank you. Scott?
How old are those bricks, and then how much is it, I mean, disrepair is there? Of course, you talk about it, I never really noticed before, but, you know, we spent a lot of money putting them in, and now we're gonna rip them out, and it's just like, what's the difference in price also? Could you tell us that roughly?
Oh, well, I think it was constructed in late
80s.
80s.
It's in the 80s.
Around 89, yeah.
Around 89. And as you can see on them, there has been some settlements. There are some with the concrete ribbons. There's been some plow catches, so snow removal is not as efficient as it could be, especially in areas where we have pedestrians crossing and everything. But like I noted, we already bid it in preserving these existing. And like I said, that was very problematic because it's a resurfacing project as well. Of course, they're going to be putting tack oil. So with heavy machinery, mills running over those pavers, and then they have tack oil potentially get on there. It was very difficult for what the contractors indicated.
I didn't know how long old they were.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing is also, seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but the comments that I hear from the businesses and the people that walk downtown is the long term that those pavers aren't, you know, there's a lot of buckling and those things are, you know, not in good shape in a lot of areas. So long term, I guess what I'm getting at is to save the ones in the street. I don't know how much sense that makes because I think when the sidewalks are ultimately redone, it's not the pavers is not the answer.
And if I may, in newer designs with our communities of streetscapes and everything, and what we've even done with our downtown riverfront, pavers were considered, but not too much.
Yeah.
Just for that same particular reason, trip hazards, everything. You know, anything more deflected, more than a quarter inch can be considered out of compliance.
They're also pretty slippery.
Yeah.
I mean, there's quite a lot that are deteriorated.
Polished.
You know, even where they're actually splitting. So, but I agree with you. The pavement footpath is.
Yeah.
They're in pretty bad shape too.
So, I mean, at some point, I know it's not within the scope of this project, but
Yeah.
I think we should at least, if we're doing the street, at least consider when and how we're going to replace the sidewalk because that is in need of disrepair as well. I understand it's outside the scope of this project, but maybe just something to think about.
That's something we can, when we start in a capital improvement planning discussions with the council, that's something we can
Sure.
talk
So,
about.
so anyone object to the option two? And if not, would someone like to make a motion for this to
I'll offer the motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Jim, any questions or comments for Brian? Scott?
Just going to make the point that if those pavers and ribbon and whatnot was put in 1989, I think we can say they're fully depreciated. And going to something that's a little easier to maintain, I think would be welcome. If we were to go with the other option and have to go through the time that you said it would take to be able to even do the bidding, I imagine that we'd be risking even whether the project could get done this summer. And I don't think we want to delay this again. We'd like to see this take place this summer.
Thanks. So we have a motion and a second. If all are in agreement, we can put this on the consent agenda. I would agree. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian. One more for Brian, two more for Brian. Next up is the Fir Avenue and Freiburg Avenue Roundabout Improvement Project.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Back in March 2020, the city and Otter Tail County initiated a joint effort to study the feasibility of roundabouts in the city of Fergus Falls. The first one was the intersection of Fir Avenue and Freiburg Avenue. That's been discussed for some time as long-range plans between the city and the county. But in that study, we also considered the intersections of Union and Tower Road. But before you, the topic right now is going to be considered the intersection of Fir Avenue and Freiburg. Since the study, this county has pursued local road improvement funds and other funding sources to fund this. However, we've been unsuccessful. So recently, the county, I believe, intends to proceed with this intersection and perhaps bonding their share of the project. The city, they prepared the attached agreement for the city council to consider because we would have a partial responsibility or ownership in this roundabout. Pursuant to the agreement and everything, I just want to go over a few as far as cost shares that they're proposing. This is very typical like we have had in the past with other joint ownership projects with the county. Number one, 1/3 of the cost of the street repair, sidewalk, and lighting included in the resurface area will be responsible to the city. 100% of the cost of non-storm sewer municipal utilities, which will be determined through final design, will be the city's expense. 1/3 of the cost of storm sewer replacement based on the MnDOT stormwater analysis. 100% of the cost for permanent and temporary easements adjoining Freiberg Avenue. I just want to note Freiberg Avenue is the bottom branch. This is all proportional to each branch that goes into the proposed roundabout. Hence, the city would have the southerly half of this project. And then a proportional pro rata amount of the total engineering cost for the project. Recently, the county secured the professional services of transportation collaborative consultants to update the cost estimates. The total estimated cost for this particular intersection to install a roundabout is about $2.2 million. This is, before you on the screen too, just to give you an idea, this was an update of the roundabout. I think it has to be rotated about 90 degrees if that's possible then. Okay. So this has been before you, but I can provide more information. But in general, our portion would be about $730,000. This cost is eligible through our municipal state aid construction account. And once we have the utilities, if we're going to do any relocations or replacements, given we would look to put this type of investment into the community, any of those would be brought out for water, sewer, would be charged to the appropriate utility enterprise fund. So if there's any questions, is what I'm going to be requesting is to initiate Public Improvement 5362, which is the Fur Avenue and Freiberg Avenue Roundabout Improvement Program. And number two, I'm going to resolution accepting Otter Tail County's agreement for this intersection improvement. So I'll open up to any questions you might have.
Thanks, Brian. Anthony?
I suppose the first question is like funding for the project. I mean, obviously, if it's basically $750,000 for kind of our portion, plus anything on the storm and sanitary and water, I think to spend $750,000 on a single roundabout is a lot of money when we have as many streets in dire need of repair. I think if we can find $1 million, because by the time you do sanitary and sewer, it's going to be $1 million. We have better places to put it than in one single project. For that reason, I can't support it at the time. We have so many roads that need repair. Just to spend the money like that.
Thanks, Anthony.
I had the same about spending money on that. And when we ran, everybody talked about in the election time about the roads. Now we're going to put a new road in and spend $1 million, and we're not going to do nothing with our other roads. So I'm agree with that. But the timeline is what I was going to say. Any idea when the timeline is going to be?
Councilmember Rachel's, no, I don't have a timeline yet. If approved, we do have a meeting set for end of January, set off with the design engineer, Stonebrook Engineering, that the county secured for this project.
24 for sure. 24 would be the earliest.
Possibly. And if I may add, understand with the costs and everything with the streets, just to give you a little bit, the funding source for this would be our municipal state aid construction account. We do have sufficient balance in that project. There is a lot of local streets that are in repair with our municipal state aid. That this municipal state aid account, only about 20% of our streets are considered municipal state aid. And with the fund balance that we get through municipal state aid, those can only be applied to those state aid streets and not our local streets. So the other 80%, yes, we do have repairs on those, but I can't use municipal state aid funds on those particular streets.
Thank you, Brian. Scott?
As far as the total cost, maybe I didn't understand this right, but our share would be about $730,000, you said. But then of that 730, that includes the water, sewer, et cetera, and then those portions come out of our water fund, our sewer fund, that kind of thing. So the water and the sewer wouldn't be on top of or in addition to the 730, leading to a higher than that cost? Or did I not understand that right?
Councilmember Kwame, yes, you are correct. But we haven't, like I said, beyond preliminary design, we do have some water, utilities, sewer, and everything. I haven't looked into we don't have a level of detail if we are going to replace or expend any of those funds at this time. I'm just identifying it, knowing we do have some utilities in the area, but if they do need to be relocated or replaced, I don't know at this time.
I think, Scott, it's 730,000 plus.
Maybe plus,
Like,
is that, and then,
you're going to dig the street
and
up.
again, the point being that we've got the money in our water fund, in our sewer fund. We have money available for those parts of the project already. And as you said, the funding for this being the Minnesota State Aid, that funding is available to us for this. I tend to support the project. I think this intersection is a safety hazard and needs to have an upgrade. And so in my view, this is something that we ought to support.
Thank you, Scott.
I
Jim?
support it also. Anybody that's sat on fur trying to make a left-hand turn is going to love this.
Sure. So at this point, we're looking for a motion to bring this
Mayor
for
Ben?
further discussion. So,
Mayor-
yeah, absolutely. Tom's got a question too. Go ahead. Al.
I just wanted to make mention too, if it's in the sewer fund, that can be used for other portions in the city too. To deplete that on this project, I don't see that viable. If we can use it on other sections with water main breaks and things of that nature during the winter, I think that's pretty pressing when somebody's basement is full of water. And here we're going to do it around a roundabout, so I don't support that.
Thanks, Al. Bill, did you have a comment on this?
So, and Brian, what you're saying is we don't have an estimate right now of what those utility portions are, right? So if we came up with those estimates, then we'd put them into our utility rate studies so we could come back and tell you, have we built this in? Because we look at our utility funds every year, we project them out 10 years, and we put in, specific projects, like we're gonna do Broadway or Stanton, and then we do some catch-all in there, but of course, I would want to know what is the estimate, so does it fit in with what we've been planning? To your point of, how does it fit in with everything else we're looking at doing too, so, yeah.
If I may too, based on my initial review of this, I don't view anything significant in sewer and water in this project, and I probably can safe to say 50 to 100,000, if that, in utility relocation. So nothing significant. There's no interceptors. There's no large conveyance system or lift stations or anything that's been identified that would have to be relocated to accommodate a roundabout. So.
And that's information that would not be available until advanced engineering happened with the project at a minimum, correct?
Until we get to design, we'll look at the existing utilities. We'll look at the proposed finished grades of the new roundabout. We'll look for vertical separation between the existing utilities. We'll look at the age and then make a determination, okay, is it best time right now to tackle this or relocate or replace this utility? Those are determinations we make in leading final design.
The reason I ask is just because if there's any information the council wants before, or if we just vote, we're obviously going to vote this morning whether or not to bring this to the council, so. Tom?
So I had a constituent this summer come and show me pictures. He lives just a couple blocks, or not even a block off of Fur, about 6 blocks west of this. And he showed me pictures of there was some kind of a break in a line, and he showed me pictures of the pipes that were dug up that had some dielectric corrosion on them. So, looking at the cost of this project, when is that infrastructure due to be replaced anyway? I'm under the impression that it's been a while since we've replaced quite a bit of that along Fur, and we might be looking at more problems with it down the line. And so if we do this as part of this project, is that going to save us money in the long run? And I'm sure that's a much deeper question than you probably have information with you this morning. But just another thing to think about is that when are we going to have to do this anyway? Dig it all up.
Councilmember Roofer, you bring up a good point, and that's what I just noted it in the memo. That's something we need to look at, and if so, it'll be on the enterprise fund. Restoration, when it comes to any utility replacement, is a huge cost. There's a difference between excavating into a gravel road versus a bituminous curb and gutter. And like I noted, with this size of a project, that's why we definitely want to just take a look at it too.
Yeah.
And perhaps replace what's beneath the roundabout at a minimum.
So it might not just be an issue of putting in a new road, it's an issue of, digging something up that we might have to dig up in a couple of years anyway.
Correct. one of the struggles we have with reconstruction mill and overlays, that risk assessment.
Sure,
We need to take a
I'm
look
sure.
at.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more that goes into that process than a lot of people realize.
I'm just trying to remember, I think east on Fur, probably 15 years ago, the county redid that. West on Fur, has that been, I guess what I'm getting at, is there any road reconstruction or improvements beyond just the roundabout that would be impacted or not happen because of this project? Is the county planning on doing Fur West, or has that been redone recently? I'm trying to
did
remember.
That was done probably
2016.
10 years ago or 8
About
years ago.
2016, that was under
Okay,
jurisdiction.
yeah,
of
I'm
the
thinking, I knew it was over by the regional treatment center. I couldn't remember closer to the what. Jim?
I do.
I make a motion that we initiate PI 5362.
Thank you, Jim. And this is for discussion at the council level, and obviously this would
I'd
not
like
be on the
to-
consent.
I'll second it, and I got a question.
Okay, we got a
Second.
motion and a second. Go ahead, Scott.
I'd like to know, could you, I know at the council meeting it might be tough to do, but could you give us kind of where the money's going to come from, in your opinion, for this project, for the 750 right now? For the council, so we can see it in front of us.
Yes, I can give you the balance. We're running a pretty, if I don't spend some of these funds in our municipal state aid construction account, there's about $2.4 million in that account that are reserved for our share of the previous project. We got a broad rate federal aid project we're working on as well, Stanton Avenue, and then this project as well.
And maybe bring an explanation about where that money can be spent and can't be spent.
And you can bring that on
Something
Monday
to
night.
make us understand.
Or Tuesday. night.
With that,
you can
maybe
Bring that on Tuesday.
a,
Yeah.
a map of the roads. You said like 20% of the streets are eligible for MSA funding. Maybe we could get a map that actually shows which of those roads.
Sure.
Because there
So-
might be some more pressing than that.
Yep.
Is that what you're getting at?
That's what I'm getting
Yeah.
at. If there's something
Yeah.
that is more in need.
Just give us all the information we just
Yeah,
don't
so this
know
is
right
this is a good conversation. Oh, yeah, Scott, last comment?
One last comment is that this is a priority for the county. Not trying to speak for Lee, but I would say that because the county has gone down this road, they've acquired property, they've done all the engineering, and this is something that they are going to want to do. It's not going to get any less expensive, and it's not going to fall off of their list of projects, so it's going to be before us, and before us, and before us. And so it seems to me that going ahead with it sooner rather than later is going to make it less expensive rather than more.
So we have a motion and a second to bring this to the council for further
Clarify the
consideration.
motion. Jim, you
What?
said just initiating the project, it's not the second request of accepting the agreement as well, or is it?
It's bringing it to the council for
Bring it to
consideration.
the council to accept.
But your motion is just to initiate.
That's what they asked for, isn't it?
Well, there's two items on the recommendation.
Okay.
Does that motion include
The,
both?
the motion should include both.
But I think we asked for more information. So if we accept the agreement, then basically we're done.
But
There's no point in having any more
We're not
discussion
gonna do
about
that
it.
Until Monday night.
Yeah, but it's just to bring it to the council for
We bring it to the
consideration.
council
of-
Monday, we vote on it Monday.
Yeah, so there's no, we're not accepting anything this morning, it's just bringing it to the council for consideration. So everyone's clear on that, right? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
I
Aye. So that motion carries to the council for consideration on Tuesday night. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Next item up for discussion is, pardon me, is Public Improvement 9504, dealing with the Aquatic Center Improvement Project. And again, Brian Navarro.
Thank you. Yes, since the voters approved the local option sales tax for both the Aquatic Center and Day Lagoon improvements last fall, I procured a professional services proposal from GLG Architects for the design development of the Aquatic Center project. For informational purposes, JLG Architects acquired the 292 group. That was the group that assisted during the recent update here in July of the Aquatic Center and the cost estimates. JLG is a reputable firm for this project and is proposing to work with the same subconsultants utilized during the recent updates. I've attached a proposal I believe that was sent out. If the proposal is acceptable, I would initiate design development phase right away with staff and volunteers. At the conclusion of design development, final design and the bidding documents would start right away. If that schedule can hold, I'm anticipating accepting bids in June or July of 2023. If favorable bids and it's awarded, we can start construction this fall and with a final completion of spring or summer 2024. Budgetary impact. The local option sales tax to publicly finance the bonds that will be issued is the current funding mechanism. Presently, the city has legislative authority for $7.8 million for this improvement. If you recall in the study determined a $9.5 million project. Therefore, the city has a legislative request to increase this cap of $7.8 million to $10.8. We would not anticipate this maybe until the conclusion of the legislation in May 2023. However, if we don't accept this proposal at this time, we could lose the construction season to start this project through these winter months. Knowing we have to get legislative approval, and we won't know till May of 2023, I spoke with JLG about the conditions, what we have before you. In their proposal, they suggested that we start with a full build-out, $9.5 million total project cost, and at that same time, during the final design, we'll incorporate alternates or identify alternates. So in the event, however unlikely, that we're not successful with the legislative request to increase the sales tax cap, then we would bid accordingly or remove project-specific components at that time to get it within the approved budget of $7.8 million. Their professional services agreement is attached for it. Page 20 of the attachment, kind of lower left-hand, shows this current understanding and how they established on their fees. Their fees are consistent and however lower than what was previously approved in the July report under the soft costs of $1.2 million. So at this time is when I'm requesting a resolution accepting JLG's architect professional service proposal for design, development, construction, final design and construction administration in an amount of $681,820. And I'll open up to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Brian.
I'll offer that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Tom.
I'll second.
Thanks, Scott. Any questions for Brian?
I got one question. How much is it? How much do they estimate? Because obviously the engineering is $680,000. I mean, how much are they anticipating that doing essentially two bids is going to cost?
They determined a flat rate of 8.7 and noted in there, they took what was prepared in the July meeting. They deducted the furnished FF&E, furnishing fixtures, $425,000. So their fee at 8.7% was based on the $7.8 million at that time, which is, it's not completely itemized, but that's the understanding that they suggested would be those alternate bids between the two budget baselines.
Yeah, along those same lines, I think I get where you're going, or maybe I don't, but I don't think we need to spend any more money on a $7.8 million design. The voters voted on the other one that's been in the tax bill. The legislature's going to get their work done. I mean, I know that there's nothing in life is guaranteed, but if there's anything that's guaranteed, you know, they're going to pass that in the tax bill. I don't want to spend a bunch of money on a what-if scenario.
That was I figured that essentially they're going to do two engineering studies. They're going to do one for the 7.8 and one for the kind of the 10.8. And it seems like we'd just be paying a professional to do a drawing.
If I may, no, we're designing for the $10.8 million project.
Sure.
And I don't think it'll be that's what their baseline costs are with some of these alternates. As noted in here, if the design amount changes significantly, then they're going to charge for more services, but we're designing for the $10.8 million.
Okay. Sounds good. Any other questions?
I have one question on the pool.
Okay.
I mean, I've had a lot of positive comments about it, but other than its placement, and I got asked if we could make sure there is no covenants or anything restricting us from building it on the Roosevelt Park.
Sure. Would staff be able to?
We'll certainly look to verify that. And note, that was in our ballot question, so we can only build it in
Yep.
Roosevelt Park because that's what the voters were asked. But
Yep.
we will research the parcel file on that and make sure we don't. I'm sure we already looked at that
But we could just bring
back
it
when
back
that
for.
study was done, but we'll just double check that.
Yep, no, thanks.
Thanks, Anthony. So we have a motion to bring this this agreement to the council on Tuesday evening. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Anyone have a objection to bring that to the consent agenda?
No.
Okay, thank you for that. Last item on the agenda this morning is the city, thank you, Brian. City council salary discussion, and Scott Kwame has brought this up, and I'll turn it over to him.
Not necessarily expecting or looking for any action on this, but just as a discussion item for us to consider. Back in, I think it was November, so just within the last few months, we had a conversation about city staff and city employee salaries and how that they were structured, and Mike Hartwell was here, and we had a presentation about matching and being competitive with, similar jobs, similar places, things like that. And it was only applied to staff, city staff. It didn't apply to council, mayor. And the way that the conversation was going was basically about the mechanism, about how we had to tie this to certain increase methods and stuff like that. And so it just raised a couple of questions for me as to when maybe there had been any increase for the council, and whether or not what the council and the mayor rates were, if they were fair and average. Because one of the points that Mike brought up is that we need to be competitive in order to attract good talent, that kind of thing. One good thing we saw last fall in the election was that there was a competitive race in each of the wards. That's not always been the case. Sometimes we'll have, and very often I think in the past, we've had a single candidate running. And maybe one of those issues is, whether it's a competitive salary or not. Again, the structure for this is when any change is made to the council or mayor's salary, it has to be voted on well in advance. And the current council can't vote on something that they benefit from, as I understand it. So if we were to vote today to increase our salaries, we wouldn't actually see any increase for 2 years because it has to go through an election cycle.
January 25 would be.
So anything that we would do now, or within the next 18 months, wouldn't take effect until January 2025, right? And so in order to think long-term and kind of stay ahead of what may or may not be a good idea, I wanted to at least get this on the table since it was recently discussed with the management salaries and whatnot, that maybe we'd want to look at some way to tie it to that, where if there's an increase at the staff level that it ties to, a 3% cost of living adjustment, for example, or something, that then it would also apply to council and mayor in just sort of an automatic way that doesn't rely on the election politics to try and get people to think, oh, I'm not going to do this, or now's a good time, to try and get away from that kind of thing and just make it something that just ties to an automatic process that's already in place. So I thought now would be a good time to raise the question because it's well in advance. We just had a conversation about this with the executive salary stuff, and I thought it would be good to at least get people thinking about it.
Thanks, Scott. Tom?
Yeah, I do support that. For instance, just between today and yesterday, I'll miss almost 4 hours of work, being at meetings, which I think are very important and I, appreciate doing. But, hopefully as on the legislative committee, we'll be taking trips down to St. Paul. And that's, again, time that I don't get paid for, in addition to the time that is spent, for all of us responding to constituent inquiries and, our various other duties. I think it's fair, and I think, Scott raises a good point about we want to make it an attractive compensation so that we can get people from all walks of life and all economic situations that can come if they want to serve their city and be well compensated for their time and effort doing so.
Thanks, Tom. One comment I just make to Scott's point, and then Jim, you can go, is that I like the way that you're just framing it as certain parameters ahead of time that are put in place. The council obviously would still have to vote on it. Some will vote in favor, some won't, but it doesn't have to be a political thing. It can be like, here's the compensation, here's how it compares to other cities, here's the increases, vote it up or down, and then move on, so it doesn't have to be in the midst of it's always a touchy subject to vote on raising your own salary. There's no doubt about it. Jim?
The last time that the city council salary was raised was in 2007, and it was $100 at that time. I brought it up 4 years ago, I think it was, and went back and went with the increases that we had given city employees from that time to 4 years ago. And I think we would have been somewhere around $850 at that point. I made a motion to increase us, I think it was $150 at the time, and it was just before an election, and it was defeated, so because people were worried that they would lose their spots because of raising their salary. But I think it is time that the council did get a raise. It's been 15 years.
Could we ask staff to come back with a recommendation of what that might look like as far as, some suggestions that the council could consider, and then, obviously.
And what the impact is, on our taxes and stuff, because that would be the first question anybody's going to ask.
I think the timing is good. If we're gonna have a discussion, whether you support it or not, the timing is right. That it's,
So we can bring back comparisons, recommendation, what are other cities doing,
and also the city attorney can weigh in on, because the charter, it is outlined in our charter as far as how we can
Right.
do that, like how would it affect that, what the voting and all that stuff would.
And we do have to keep in mind that we're much better than other cities.
Yes, Al.
Just
We are good.
just a
Fergus is
comment. I'm new to this whole show, and I met with the payroll person last week, and I don't even know what it is, to be honest with you. I don't know, nor do I really care, just due to the fact that I feel it's kind of a civic duty. If somebody's going to run for an office, it's not the money, especially for a city council job, because I don't even know what it is, to be honest with you. I know what I signed up for, but I think that's where I'm kind of coming from. I'm not saying yes or no. It's just a comment, and I don't think it's money motivated that somebody's going to run for city council. If it is, they're doing it for the wrong reason. Just a comment.
Thank you, Al. Any other questions or comments?
I think in that discussion, maybe we have to kind of come back to, like, as Tom alluded to, we have a meeting now with the committee of the whole, where before we obviously had like a finance committee and a kind of an alternate committee. And so, you kind of had obviously a more collective meeting, 3 times in a month. Now we have that every other week. So basically, it does make it harder to function and fit everything else from a work life around the fact that we have a meeting. Well, and this period is tough where you have like the holidays, and you get Tuesday nights as opposed to Monday nights. But I feel that we've shortened up Monday nights and elongated Wednesday mornings. And, there's a lot of work goes in from a staff point of view to prepare for basically 4 meetings a month, as opposed to, if we, maybe looked at, say, 2 council meetings and then sort of, maybe a placeholder for a special meeting if there's once a month. And I think that would, it probably wouldn't reduce the time commitment as such, but instead of Monday night being an hour, Monday night would be 2 hours, but that would save you Wednesday mornings of being an hour. So I mean,
So
maybe we have to
eliminate-
kind of, if we're going to look at it, let's look at it holistically about everything.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of validity in what you say. I think the one thing, as we've experienced, the nice thing about Wednesdays is you have a chance to process. Like this morning, we have a good, healthy
Yep.
discussion, get some more information, and come into Monday night. That would be my only comment.
Yeah,
So-
no, I'm not
Yeah, so-
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just
So
saying
maybe
it's like-
even as one committee,
Yeah,
whatever,
maybe
maybe we
just
can
one
put this.
committee a whole
We can
amount as
anticipate
opposed
what,
to 3.
we can, I
Cool.
think, anticipate what topics will be
more
controversial
challenging.
and
Yep.
challenging that are going to require more time. So it's, something definitely to look at when we have that consideration.
We-
Sorry,
we-
I don't think in time. Yeah.
We used to have 2 committees,
Yep.
and one met each week, and the other committee that wasn't meeting with the first one didn't know what was going on. So that's why we did the
Yeah.
committee of the whole, to make everybody knowledgeable about what was going on in the other meetings. So it's just one meeting, and it's worked out well. And we get a lot of discussion here Wednesday morning that we might not get Monday night. I think the Wednesday morning meetings are great.
Going off with Jim,
Yeah, please,
We
go
used to,
ahead.
when we were on the council, before we had, the council chambers was full of the other council members anyway. So all 8 of us were sitting here.
Yep.
4 were up here and 4 were, and so we thought, why not? We're gonna be here anyway, we might as well just do it like we're doing it now. So
Yeah.
I thought it was a good idea that
I
way.
think so. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Scott?
In order to bring a point to this, I'll make the motion that we ask staff to investigate this and come with further recommendations.
Thanks, Scott.
I would second it.
Thanks, Jim. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. And with that.